Good evening. Good evening, everybody. All right. I'd like to welcome everybody. Good evening, everyone. All right. I didn't want to use my big, big girl voice here. Again, good evening, everyone. It's great to be here today to see everybody here. I hope you were able to enjoy a little bit of fellowship, a little bit of networking and talking with your fellow supervisors and talking with some of the administrators and division staff that we have here today. Before we get started, you'd all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, we'll go around the table and have a roll call, and then we will start with Jim Wallace out in the audience. So I will, again, I'm County Exec Samantha Kirkman. Welcome.
Finance Director, Patty Merriman.
Vice Chair Daniel Gashke.
County Board Supervisor Aaron Decker.
Mark Target, Supervisor, District 21.
John Poole, District 20. Eric Meadows, District 18. Tim Stocker, District 14.
Dave Gertson, District 15.
Frederick Brookhouse, District 16.
William Grady, District 1.
Felix Garcia, District 10.
John Morsey, District 9. Andres Gama, District 6.
Julia Robinson, District 5.
Stephanie Nez, District 2.
Shelley Billingsley, Director of Public Works and Development Services.
John Jansen, Director, Department of Human Services.
David Zerner, Kenosha County Sheriff's Office. Abe Newland, District 12. Matt Lays, Assistant Budget Director.
Arna Bench, Budget Director.
Jim Wallace, Golf Division Director. Matt Storino, Director of Facilities. Wyatt Moore, Director of Parks and Recreation. Greg Bolt, Director of Highways.
Karen Terry, HR Business Partner.
Nick Ruth, Finance Manager for Public Works.
Pamela Larson, Area Extension Director.
Annie Bueller, Director of Planning and Development.
Tammy Capito, Human Services CFO. Chiquetta Avila, Fiscal Manager, Human Services.
Matthew Fleming, Purchasing Director. Mike Bastianelli, Director of IT.
Ashley Lutterman, Assistant Director of Human Resources. Clara Tappa, Director of Human Resources. Carrie Foss, Director of Behavioral Health Services. Kristen Rabideau, Public Safety Social Worker. Rebecca Mataska, Clerk of Courts. Terry Jacobson, County Treasurer. Jennifer Mack, Register of Deeds.
Justin Miller, Chief Deputy.
Kelly Clark, Fiscal Services Manager for Sheriff's Office.
Chris Hanna, Director of Emergency Management.
Lloyd Plowner, Health Officer.
Heather Benoist, Director, Aging and Disability Services.
Brian Weinsdorf, Manager, Aging and Disability Services.
Erica Bloomberg, County Finance. Maureen Peterson, County Finance.
Brian Beth, Fiscal Manager, Payroll.
Jennifer Blasi, Director of Veteran Services.
Doug Bartz, Director of the Southeast Workforce Board.
Justin Feeney, the Director of Workforce Development.
Pamela Consis, Director, Division of Children and Family Services. Annette Halsey, DCFS Program Manager.
Mary Byer, Director, Juvenile Court Intake.
Frank Martinelli, Project Manager, Department of Public Works. Scott Schutze, Director of Division of Land Information.
Laura Irvin, Manager of Child Support. Linda Bogdala, Administrator for Brookside Care Center and Willowbrook Assisted Living.
Patty Hall, Medical Examiner.
Jesse Shorten, Chief Deputy Medical Examiner.
Jenny Parkinson, Behavioral Health Manager.
Lauren Yanakopoulos, Behavioral Health Quality Analyst.
Joe Potente, Communications Manager.
Xavier Solis, District Attorney.
Rebecca Duggar, Assistant Director of Human Services.
Rich Burkhardt.
Joe Patel, Community Secretary.
Well, I want to thank everybody again to speak tonight. Just press your little speaker button so that everybody can hear you. It is being audio and recorded tonight. We weren't able to do the owl just because it was too encompassing. So again, we are recording this meeting and it is available, as well as all the budget handouts. They are up on the website already under the budget tab under finance. So feel free to share with your constituents going forward, because it's valuable information that our teams put together to share tonight. As we get started, I just want to thank everybody again for coming tonight to the 2026 budget vision meeting. I would like to take the opportunity to thank Chair Newhouse for her leadership. We've gotten a lot done in the last couple months, and I really appreciate working with you and bringing everybody together tonight. As we face uncertain times, this might be the most challenging budget that I have undertaken in my role. And I look forward to working with you tonight and going forward on the ideas and the suggestions that we have. It's a great opportunity to hear from you what constituents are talking, what residents are talking about in our community. And as we get started, I want to turn it over to the chair for a few remarks as well as we go forward.
Thank you, Samantha. I'd like to say good evening, everyone. I appreciate you all taking the time to join us this evening for this budget vision meeting. This session is intended to set the strategic foundation for our upcoming budgeting process. Our focus will be on aligning financial planning with organizational goals, identifying key priorities, and anticipating the challenges and opportunities ahead. Your insights and collaboration are vital as we work towards a clear, sustainable, and purpose-driven budget. Thank you all again for being here. And I'd also like to say that last year, the county exec and I have worked very well together. The board has worked very well together, and we have accomplished a lot in the last year, more than I think other boards have in previous history. So I hope that continues. I hope everyone's ready to roll up your sleeves, and this budget is going to be challenging and we're going to have to make some hard decisions, but I know we can do it. I know if we have dialogue and we work together and we share our ideas ahead of the night of the budget on the board floor. You know, we do the hard work in committee, do the heavy lifting in committee. And when we get to the board floor, we can get it passed without a lot of angst. So I'm hoping that this year goes as smoothly as last year. So again, thank you all for being here, and I do appreciate everyone's hard work and leadership.
To set the stage on the budget process, we have a great finance team, and we're really lucky to have Patty, Varna, and Matt. And Patty's going to start tonight giving us a little bit of an overview. I don't know if she's working off her finance packet or
I'm working off my notes, but you can follow in your finance packet because it's pretty close. I'll start with 2024. Highlights for 2024. The 2024 draft general fund report can be found on page 3 of the finance packet. I'm not going to walk through it line by line. However, we did close 2024 pretty close to break even with 2023. There were deficits in health insurance, internal service fund, sales tax revenue, and sheriff's department operations. The Human Services Department experienced a substantial surplus due to higher intergovernmental revenues and lower placement costs. At closeout, we were projecting a larger deficit in the unassigned general fund. However, there were a couple of journal entries regarding delinquent properties, which lowered that deficit to near break even, just under $100,000. Brookside and Willowbrook had an excellent fiscal year, reducing both long-term and short-term liabilities due to a sizable surplus of operating income. Gulf Division ended 2024 with more than $1 million surplus, continuing a trend of profitability and self-sufficiency toward both its operating and capital budgets. We maintained our AAA rating with S&P and demonstrated continued fiscal accountability and excellence. Moving on to 2025. We're currently preparing for our audit of our year-end financial statements. The external auditors will be here for final field work in May. We're preparing for the 2026 budget manual and document rollout, which will occur Memorial Day weekend. Our rating agency presentation with S&P will be midsummer. We'll be reviewing the status of projects for the 2025 capital borrowing in July. We go to market in August and close in early September. In August, we will gather information for the 2026 CIP vision meeting, which will occur in early September. Now I'll turn it over to Barna Bench, our budget director, who will discuss the 2026 budget.
Thank you, Patty. So I'd like to give some detail and some flesh out a little bit more some of the larger issues that we'll be going through and managing through the 2026 budget process. First one I'll touch on is there's a planned class and compensation market refresh involving working with our outside consultant with human resources. So we'll be working with that to manage, to see how we can work with that in the 2026 budget. Then the next one is the human services building, where the plan is to move in 2026. So there will be some 2026 ramifications when it comes to new facilities and utilities and that sort of thing. So we'll be working through that as well. Some recent positive developments that will help with the 2026 budget. At the state level, there was a state Supreme Court ruling that eliminated some of the uncertainty around line item veto. And with that, the expectation is that the state will be able to pass a 2-year budget, biennial budget. And with that certainty comes, it helps with us being able to budget figures for human services and other departments. The other one is sales tax. We had a very good first 2 months of the year in 2025. If we continue with just a regular trend of 3%, will more than make our budget for 2025, and that'll set up us well for 2026 to help offset levy. On the challenging side, we have the last 2 years with health insurance, we've pretty much held the line on increasing health insurance across the board. So with that, with normal medical costs and claiming for inflation, we'll have to work with that and manage, looking at plan design changes, cost sharing, that sort of thing, to make that into the 2026 budget as well. Then I also would mention the sheriff's office as well. There were some pressures on various jail type expenditures in 2024, and with that, we'll be working with that in order to address some of those budgetary shortfalls necessarily, and then being able to make sure that we develop an overall good tax levy as part of that process. That's just touching on some of the highlights. Obviously, we'll be getting into way more in the details going into the future here. As Patty mentioned, the next page is the general fund summary, which we ended the year pretty much break even, which was very good considering some of the challenges that we had. And the last page is a budget planning timeline. I'd like to give these dates out ahead of time to give everyone an opportunity to get those dates on the calendar. Today is basically the kickoff of the 2026 budget. And then in the next month or so, we'll be rolling out salary projections to the departments and overall instructions for departments going forward. And that'll start the process through the summer. And then we'll be working through the fall to the presentation at the September and October. With that, I will push it to get some more information on the embedded social worker.
Thank you.
My name's Kristen Rabideau. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I took the position with Behavioral Health Services as the public safety social worker. I am embedded with the Kenosha Sheriff's Office. I started this position on March 10th. Within the first 3 weeks, I focused on training, and training was learning different community resources, ride-alongs with deputies, and connecting with high schools, school resource officers just to see where the need would be for me to help them. So far, within 3 weeks, I've had 14 calls and referrals. With those 14 calls, I've been able to respond to Wilmot High School, Kenosha County Jail, community homes, and the emergency department. I respond out either through deputy request or referrals when I come in the next day. Of those 14 calls, I've been able to divert 2 potential emergency detentions into voluntary placements for mental health care. Of those 14 calls, 6 of them did not need crisis contact, as I was able to manage them. I have been able to collaborate with Crisis for 2 jails emergency detentions to help streamline the process. And then I've also been forming a relationship with the hospital social worker to bridge the gap of communication between the jail and the hospital to reduce the deputies' time spending in the hospital for mental health patients and determining if they need further mental health contact with Crisis. Of those 14 calls, I have been doing follow-ups. So I've done 6 follow-ups after my initial contact. I have done 2 second follow-up contacts, and then I have 1 youth out at Wilmot where I'm doing a 3rd follow-up contact, which has helped that SRO keep him in class instead of chasing him around the building, utilizing his time. So within the 3 weeks, we have done a lot of contact so far.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And I know you're here to answer questions after if people have other questions that want to speak to you about your new role. So thank you so much for joining the team. Next, we have Jim Wallace, who's going to give us a little bit of an overview on golf. It's a little history for those who might not know and where we're at today.
Well, I thought it might be helpful to give a little bit of background on, the first thing I think of is why did governments get involved in golf? And, golf came to the United States in the late 1800s, and it was brought over by Scottish and Irish immigrants that carried a significant amount of wealth with them. So most of the golf being played in the United States was at private clubs where common people didn't have access to them. So 1895 was the first municipal golf course I promise I'm going to get to today in the next 5 years within 5 minutes. Okay. So New York City, their Parks Department decided in 1895 to open a golf course. Today, there are roughly 2,900 municipal, whether state, city, county owned golf courses in the United States. 18% of the 16,000 golf courses in the United States are municipal golf course operations. Golf is roughly a $102 billion economy that contributes annually about $6 billion to charity. So it's grown into a massive industry, and municipal golf was the key in the growth of the game because it allowed the game to be affordable for common everyday people. Obviously, on our end, we provide opportunities for all walks of life to be introduced to the game. It's recreation for life. We have folks in their 80s and 90s that are able to come out and utilize our facilities all the way down to 7-year-olds. Preserves green space for the communities that hold on to these golf courses. A lot of golf courses provide flood attenuation for the surrounding communities. Currently, I would say roughly 70% of our staff, especially on the maintenance side, is retired members of our community. We've seen a lot of that since COVID. And we don't see that slowing down. I believe more folks are going to retire in 2025 than any other time in history. So that's still what we're seeing come in the door looking for work, whether full-time or part-time. And we try to draw visitors to the community. So as far as the Kenosha County golf courses, Petrifying Springs was built as part of the Works Progress Administration in 1936. And Brightondale was built in 1972 and expanded in the early 90s from a 27-hole facility to a 45-hole facility. And For some time, the golf division did require some supplemental taxpayer dollars to help fund operations. About 2011 is when the golf courses sort of crossed over the line and started funding themselves. And since then, between 2011 and 2019, there were still some times where the capital was bonded, but then repaid. Pretty much since the pandemic, we've been able to fund our own capital purchases as well. So we're very proud of that, and that's something we cherish. We don't ever want to turn back around. So our future is geared toward, you'll see in our vision statement, our upcoming capital projects. And what we try to stay mindful of is that we are prepared to delay those projects in order to make sure our reserves are healthy enough to sustain. The unfortunate thing about golf is we are subject to the weather. A bad weather year can hurt us. And so obviously it's been a cold spring. We're doing okay. The golf courses are still very busy when the weather's been good, and we hope it's turned now. But we are subject, if we have 10 rainout weekends in a year, that's a big hit. So we want to make sure our reserves are healthy enough to allow some resilience in our division to protect us from those bad years, all the while maintaining an affordable but a high quality product. I mean, that's what brings people to the golf course, is the quality of the golf course. If your golf course is inexpensive but in poor condition, people will come once, they won't come again. The reason they come back to our golf course is because we do take pride in the conditioning of the golf courses. Our goal is to have people to leave and say, for what I paid, that was a great experience. It was worth more than what I paid for it. But we're always watching prices around the area and making sure we're right there with, the affordable facilities in the area. So looking in the future, that's the goal, is to maintain our reserves to a level that will help us be resilient from a bad season or two, and keep investing what we can when we can in making the product better for the users.
Thank you, Jim. Next up, we have Carrie to talk about Lake Behavioral, giving us an overview of how things are going there.
Well, I'm not going to start my story in the 1800s, but I am going to start it with going back 8 years ago. Some of us in this room started working with Lake Behavioral to figure out how could we access such a large inpatient facility so close to us. With it being over the state line, we had to do a lot of work to be able to get approval from DOJ and DHS. We are the first county in the state of Wisconsin to have such a thing. So when you're looking at all of that work, 8 years, it came to fruition in 2023. So in 2022, so we understand, 85% of all of our Chapter 51s went to a state mental health institute, Winnebago or Mendota. Of 85%, that's 202 individuals. So that was in 2022. We went live with Lake in April of 2023. And we made some pretty drastic policy changes within 51 system, and with partnership with all of our law enforcement agencies and crisis unit, we changed another policy in August of 2023. We ended that year with 60% of all of our Chapter 51s, 122. Last year, we ended hospitalization data of 43% of our Chapter 51s going to the State Mental Health Institute, 88 individuals. So within just about 2.5 years, we went from 85% to 43% of going to the state hospital with onboarding Lake Behavioral Health. I do want to report our final Q1 numbers. 9% of our Chapter 51s went to the State Mental Health Institute in Q1. That's pretty impressive. So what I'm going to leave that as you hear Director Jansen talk about other initiatives that Human Services wants to put together, know that we're always looking at what's going to be quality services, and most importantly, what's going to be accessible to the residents. And knowing that these folks are staying much closer to home where their natural supports can be a part of their recovery it's life-changing.
Thank you, Carrie, for the update. Next, we're going to have the sheriff give an overview of proposed project going forth in the next budget.
Thank you. You heard Christian Rabideau speaking. Christian Rabideau is our embedded social worker. So I'm going to talk now about the SAFER program, and that's an acronym, Specialized Alerts for Enhanced Response. I'm sure everyone in the room's heard of an instance where law enforcement responded to a situation where an individual may have had a mental health diagnosis or a cognitive disorders to that effect. Having that information for the officers at the time of that call would have been so helpful. And I haven't been on patrol in several years, but having that information is just critical, right? So the SAFER program, this is a partnership with Kenosha Police Department. And as you know, we share joint services. So this is a program where I brought up Kristen because she's already utilized this program and she's already signed up a county family into this program, inputting that family's information into our system. So a response to that person's residence or their school, we're going to have a photograph of that person. We're going to have their specifics about what they're dealing with and how better to respond to that, whether it's mental health stuff or what have you. This is such a good program because these people can put the information in the computer. It goes right to Joint Services, and then Joint Services controls dispatch, and every officer in the entire county is going to have that information. Okay, so it's a really pretty robust. We've been working. Our staff has worked with KPD to do this, to put this together. We've already had the opportunity to troubleshoot a little bit, and I talked to Mike Bastianelli in passing today, and we're already working together to get our moniker on it, because some families, when they go on that page, you don't see Kenosha Sheriff's Office, you're lower on the page, and that's an issue because some people are like, well, I live in the county, this is the city police. Well, we're working together on this, and it's important everyone knows that. But I'm really excited about this. We're going to do we're planning for a hard launch. We're going to work with our school resource officers for this hard launch for May, because May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And we're going to focus on our students so that we can get as many of these individuals, these young folks in this program as fast as possible before the summer. So hopefully we can have a safer and healthier summer for them. Oh, excuse me. Did I do good? It's my time. Okay. There's some issues that we have. One thing, there's a thing with ADRC, and I'll let them speak to that for themselves. But if they would talk about File of Life, I would appreciate that, because there's some question marks as to if you have other issues, how to get that into the system. But ADRC does that, so if we can answer those questions later. Thank you.
So then that leads to the next, now we have the divisions to discuss their budget packets, and I'm going to turn it over to the sheriff, or am I going to go to the chief deputy? So, yeah, all right. So you get another 5 minutes.
I got to restart my clock.
We want to make sure.
Okay, we want to talk about unrealistic numbers today, okay? The 5-minute thing, that's the most unrealistic number you've ever given me. There's a lot of them. Thank you, my friend. You can do it. Okay, so as you know, in the committees, you all heard about many of these things, right, in the county board meeting. So we have successfully transferred a jail medical provider from NAFCare to Vital Court. We're watching the expenses. They come with this robust plan. Hopefully we're going to send less folks out to hospitals. Okay, we're watching, we're going to see. Aramark kitchen contract, as you know, we've changed that. I've talked to some county board supervisors that had questions about it. Thank you for the call. I appreciated the opportunity to share that information with you. That does go live on May 1st. CRATE, Kenosha Racine Area Investigative Team. It's already been officially launched. We've utilized it multiple times. It's a multiple jurisdictional law enforcement organization, right? It's a collaboration. It's for all kinds of investigations, where it's a officer involved shooting, homicides, things of that nature. If there's jail deaths, if there's an investigation that they can't do for themselves, which all those reasons would be, that agency will step out and the other agency will come together to get that done. Right? We used to use DCI all the time. Budget things being what they were, we've stepped away from that model completely, and now we have resources, so we're never going to be laying up when it's time for a good investigation. Our recruitment efforts, no detentions. We're completely up to speed right now, fully staffed for patrol. We still have our issues with detentions, but we're working on that actively. Evergreen, no, there's Claire. Thank you, Claire. Sorry, we're working so hard. Our data analyst is providing reports to the municipalities, which you've seen, and all you elected officials on a monthly basis. We appreciate that. Stepping down. We've also created codes, and she can use those codes to track our overtime very specifically. Those questions always come up, so we're going to be able to these reports, figure out where every penny's going, what types of calls for service, making sure we're not having waste. The county board supervisors are, I want to say, just nicely discussed with me about the overtime, but nevertheless, that's what we're up to with that. Where we at? All right. All right. So we have some exposures, things we're worried about in our early budget, right? We're not going to ask for FTEs. I said that in the last meeting. The 78 FTEs I was looking for, I just forgot about. Don't worry about it. Capital projects, our kitchen repairs, as you know, we've been working on those for a while. In finance, we brought that up on multiple occasions. That's a continued investment due to the aging assets. Annual procurement of 13 squads, including our necessary upfitting, and very expensive. It's a timely thing. If you've been by KCDs, you see the squads lined up out there. Fleet's doing the best they can. KPD has new squads too, so they're working through it. Our body worn cameras, as you all know, our contract ends in we have a new contract scheduled to begin in 2026. Oh, excuse me, no, it's incorrect. I read the wrong line. Our body worn camera contract is going to end. So we're going to be talking in 26 about the new contract. Okay, so strap in. Our taser cartridge replacements, they're expired. We're always updating those as we can. Huge equipment needs, standard stuff, range equipment, force training, possible kitchen repairs that we hopefully we don't need. Potential revenue challenges. This is a big one. I know a lot of people have this question. When we try to assess how many we're budgeted for 60 U.S. Marshal inmates. Now look, I know some folks are curious about that. We're averaging at 26, so that is a shortfall. Another question mark is our inmate phone revenue. I heard people saying that some counties are expecting $1 million shortfall. Well, we have that as a $500,000 budget item for us in our contract, and the FCC is they're in the middle of something, right? So we don't know if they're going to completely change that. What they're going to do is they're going to change the way inmates can be billed for communications, telecommunications, things of that nature. So we don't have an answer for that. Okay, we don't know if this new administration is going to stop that. We don't know if they're going to change it. We don't have an answer for that. So this is something in the budget process we're going to have to focus on and try to come up with appropriate answers. OT, we discussed staffing, inmate medical costs. I'm hoping with the new medical provider that the inmate medical costs decrease. That's a #1 concern for our fiscal services. We're watching that very closely. We want to work with finance on a more realistic overtime budget for 26. Reducing the deficit to a more realistic level. We worked with Patty Barner very closely last time with this. It's something that we always have to work on. Okay, so our contract negotiations with deputy sheriffs begins next month. So we'll have a better idea what's coming with that. And as I discussed, the inmate medical services. On the last page, we've discussed this on multiple occasions, the officer wellness program. Our officer wellness program, it's a proactive initiative that we talked about. It's designed to support the overall well-being of our sworn and civilian personnel. Program addresses physical, mental, and emotional challenges faced by everyone who serves this community, ultimately enhancing performance, retention, and public trust. I'm speaking fast because everyone told me to not talk too long. But I'm going to slow down and I'm going to speak a little bit more cadenced. This matters very much because of the calls for service our officers are on every single day. Today, when I was on my way driving down here to drop off a shirt for Kristen Rapido, excuse me, there's a semi-rollover accident on the state line. It's going to be shut down for multiple hours. You can hear it in their voices. It's a bad scene. While they're there trying to keep traffic in check because it's rush hour, everybody's going home. There's a heroin overdose in the trailer park right there. So these guys are trying to figure out on the scene who's going to leave their post to run over here and try to save this guy. This is why I'm asking for this. This is why we bring this up repeatedly. Okay. I'm not asking for that right now. I want to work with everybody here, but just know that this is something that is in the forefront. The woman, the professional, the mental health professional that we've been talking with, I know some of our people have already reached out to her with the options we have through the county, and I'm going to make an appointment too. I want the folks to see that this is not a shameful thing. This is not a bad thing. We got to do it. So I appreciate you being patient with my time, John, and thank you very much.
Thank you. I just want to draw your attention to the human service packet that you have in front of you. On the second page, after that beautiful photograph on the first, you'll find some of our successes this year. And then the third page talks about our 2026 goals and proposals that are currently in the state budget that we're hoping at least some of those move forward. As many of you or all of you should know, that Human Services receives the vast majority of our funds from the federal government and our state. And currently there's much uncertainty about the funding at both levels. We've highlighted in the paper before you some of the budget proposals at the state level that we believe would have a positive impact on the service delivery in our county. In addition to the above mentioned uncertainties with fundings, we have concerns about funding for our contracted services providers. We know that like ours, their costs have increased, and unfortunately, we were not able to provide increases in this year's budget. We rely on these providers to provide a vast array of services that meet our residents' needs. And without increases, their ability to both retain and hire qualified staff will be at risk. We always look for efficiencies in our programs and ways to meet the changing needs of our community. Examples of this include the grants that we are constantly searching and applying for if it makes sense for us, not just chasing the dollars, and our community partnerships that we have. We will continue to emphasize this in our 2026 budget planning process and submission. What is most important is that we offer our community the best services we can in a fiscally responsible manner that will adapt to the changing needs of the community we serve. The Human Service team looks forward to bringing you a budget that meets those needs. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm going to try to summarize the best I can the entire packet of DPWDS. I'm going to talk a little bit about each division and then specifically some of the larger projects that we're working on. In 2024, the Kenosha County DPWDS recorded notably accomplishments across all divisions. The Division of Planning and Development processed over 1,000 various permits supporting continued development and land use deficiencies. Division of Parks and Recreation saw the stewardship of more than 1,500 acres across 8 parks, prioritizing improved accessibility, sustainability, and visitor experience. We've successfully organized 253 programs and events, welcoming approximately 33,900 attendees to our park system. We've contributed to community enhancement through the addition of a new playground at Silver Lake Park, a small dog park at Old Settlers, and 7 miles of mountain bike trails. Division of Highway completed significant infrastructure initiatives, including the resurfacing of 14 miles of roadways, the replacement of 1 bridge, maintenance of 8 I-94 bridges, and the installation of approximately 30 culvert pipes while advancing several major roadway projects. Division of Golf, as you heard, had a record year, hosting over 70 events and surpassing 120,000 rounds of golf played, with revenue exceeding $5 million for a second consecutive year. Major renovations were completed at the Red Pine course, enhancing both player experience and course sustainability. Division of Facilities implemented critical improvements such as the replacement of generators, installation of an emergency siren, and accessibility upgrades while adhering to strict budgetary guidelines. Finally, the University of Wisconsin Extension Division engaged more than 6,200 participants through educational initiatives and spearheaded with planning and development the launch of the Kenosha County Housing Task Force, fostering collaboration among key community stakeholders to address housing needs. Collectively, these achievements underscore the department's unwavering commitment to service excellence, sustainable development, and the enhancement of quality of life for our residents of Kenosha County. So I'm going to start in the future. We will implement several strategic initiatives aimed at enhancing internal operations, staff engagement, and organizational resilience. The department will launch the development of supervisor-led task forces to better align department goals with employee input, initially focusing on improving safety, training programs, and workplace culture. Simultaneously, the management team finalized a detailed update to our continuity of operations of government plan to ensure the seamless delivery of essential functions during disruptions, with annual reviews to maintain its effectiveness. Additionally, we were able to update the emergency plan for the Kenosha County Center which will be completed in 2025 with staff training sessions continuing into 26. To promote employee camaraderie, we will maintain quarterly newsletters, seasonal potlucks, and ongoing celebrations of birthdays and work anniversaries, fostering a positive and connected workplace environment. Recognizing the complexity of project management, we will continue to employ a dynamic Gantt chart like the one I brought, just for an example of this year's projects. It helps us visualize our project timelines, coordinate overlapping tasks, and optimize resource allocation, adjusting continually to reflect real-time changes such as weather or planning delays. By mapping these projects across the calendar year, the department can better allocate employee resources, balance workloads, and ensure timely project delivery while maintaining staff fatigue and maximizing efficiency. The strategic use as a visual project planner will directly support our initiatives aimed at strengthening workforce morale, fostering clear communication, and promoting a collaborative environment. These efforts, together with a continued focus on professional development and infrastructure improvements, will ensure that staff are supported, engaged, and empowered to deliver exceptional services to our community. To talk about a few projects, first off, the Human Services Relocation Project recently underwent a significant transition in leadership. On March 12th, a new project manager assumed control following the unexpected departure of the previous. This change prompted a swift and thorough onboarding process, including in-depth reviews of project documents and active engagement with the county, partners in design, and our subcontractors. Since this transition, the new manager has brought improved communication and coordination to the project. He has fostered a stronger collaboration and is helping to stabilize momentum despite earlier disruptions. Even with the transition, the project still remains on budget and is moving forward with renewed clarity and focus. We did apply a second sheet for Human Services to give a more in-depth update. Two other projects I'm going to kick over to our directors to just give a little bit more background. I'm going to start with Wyatt on Kemper Shoreline, and then Greg will talk about the County Trunk Highway W.
Thank you, Shelley. So just to talk about the Kemper Shoreline a little bit, just because that's been an ongoing project at Public Works since before my time even at the county. So that project right now, what we're looking to do is completely redo the shoreline in front of the Kemper Center, because that shoreline is already heavily eroded and it is expected to erode more over the years. We have a current plan for how to redo this shoreline, but its current price tag is about $34 million. That's a pretty lofty goal, and we've been going after grant funding pretty aggressively over the years to try and achieve that goal. But as you can imagine, there aren't a lot of grant programs out there that can sustain that large a number. So the one we were in the middle of doing an application for through FEMA is called BRIC, Building Resilient Communities. They completely canceled that program just in the last couple of weeks. So not only are they no longer accepting applications for that program, grant funding that was issued in previous years is no longer available. So we're shifting into what we consider to be Plan B, where that is going to shift to a phased approach, where we're going to take the shoreline in 3 different chunks, and that will make it, we hope, a lot more manageable to acquire grant funding to achieve a brand new shoreline there over the next between 5 and 10 years, if we can achieve that. If we cannot achieve grant funding, we do see this as a serious issue and an impending issue. So we will be putting it into the capital budget if grant funding is not successful through the phased approach. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. So to talk a little bit about the County Trunk Highway W project. County Trunk Highway W is a significant north-south roadway in western Kenosha County. It begins at the Illinois state line and goes all the way to the Racine County line to the north. So it's one of the only county highways that spans the entire county length. In 2026, there is a project plan to resurface County Trunk Highway W from the Illinois state line to County Trunk Highway C. So that project is currently in design, currently working through real estate acquisition. So that project is already programmed and budgeted through the capital improvement plan. But another really significant area of County Trunk County W goes from County Trunk Highway C, where the 2026 project will end, all the way to State Highway 50. Now, this section of roadway borders the Fox River in several areas, and due to that, we've had concerns with washout from the river washing out County W. And in fact, in 2019, there was an emergency shutdown of County Trunk Highway W, in which sheet piling needed to be installed and the roadway was closed for a significant amount of time. Obviously, that is not the goal that we want to do again. So we are evaluating this section of County Trunk Highway W, not only to resurface the deteriorating surface, but also protect it from the shoreline and riverbank erosion that is adjacent to Highway W. It is, like I said, a major thoroughfare. One of the areas of most concern is adjacent to the Kenosha County Fairgrounds, where the roadway is very close to the Fox River. So that is the project we're looking into. Obviously, we'll be looking at different funding opportunities, but most likely there will be some capital improvement impacts to improve that roadway in the future.
Is that complete? All right. Okay, great. Thank you so much for that in-depth discussion. So this is a time where everybody now gets to, ask questions, open it up to the supervisors that are here. Again, remember, we have many of the managers and the division heads here to answer some of the questions. But I know Supervisor Morrissey, you seem to have the first one and wanted to ask a question right away. So I will turn it over to you to ask a question or two, and then we'll be respectful of everybody else.
Sure. My first few questions, I think, are very quick. First one for the golf course, I've been asked many times, how do you count a round of golf? What counts as a round of golf?
So we count starts. So we say 120,000 rounds. That's 120,000 starts. So whether you play 18 holes or 9 holes, and so that's how many people have started. That's not 18 or 9. That's any start is a count.
Okay, thank you. For Carrie, Lakeview Behavioral Health is great. Are the chapter numbers up or down of actual people being chaptered? I know that there's some frustration on the city police that there's not as many people being actually held that they would like. So I just don't know, are the numbers up or down?
I'm sorry, can you ask the question, what you're not, the city police have not as many people being held? What?
Right, that people that they would like to hold in chapters are not being held.
So approved?
Yes.
Okay, I have the overall numbers are trending down. They have been trending down since 2019.
The shoreline at Kemper, I think you said a 5 to 10 year phase-in plan. If we don't get grants, and right now they seem to be pretty tough to get, are you looking at next year putting CIP funding in? Or are we going to wait for 5 or 10 years before we decide that the grants aren't available?
So if grants aren't available, we would more likely realistically be looking at 2027 rather than 2026, only because we would have to go through the plan set again and change it to a phased approach. Because at the moment, if we were to try and put it in the capital budget with the current 100% plan set that we have, it would be 34 million. And we would still like to have a little bit of time to not only redo the plan so they can be phased, but to attempt to go after grant funding for that phase 1. So we're going to go after it for the rest of this year and for 26. And if it's not looking good by the end of, well, close to budget season for 2027, so I guess August 2026, that's when we would start to look at a capital project.
So do you have a cost for the 3 different phases?
Now, at the moment, no, because right now, it gets a little complicated when you get into the details because there's a lot of mobilization costs, demobilization costs that are all related to mobilizing once. Whereas if we're going to go into a 3-phase approach, each phase would be a little bit higher than if you were to take that 34 million and just chop it up into 3 pieces.
Sure. You have
30 squad cars, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Monica, from the joint services that are sitting at KCCC, waiting to be upfitted. I think we were told there's 2 per month, roughly. Can't do the math, but that's only 24 cars roughly. PD's got 9, and you want 13 more next year. I get the whole concept of keeping them, but what are we gonna do to get these 30 cars upfitted?
Upfitted, you mean? In a timely fashion? Well, right now, like it just articulated, we're in an absolute gridlock. There are other options, but they're quite costly. Talk to Pleasantbury Police Department because they send all of theirs out. I don't have the numbers here in front of me, but it's quite expensive. So that's something that we're actually talking about. Is there a viable option for us to do? I'm sure there are some, but obviously it would have to be done the way we do all the other squads, so everything works together. But it's a possibility, but that expense is not something I think anyone has an appetite for.
I understand, but adding 13 more cars, now I've got 43 cars sitting out there, plus the city cars, so just want to make sure you're looking at what we're gonna do.
Absolutely.
Last question I'll ask, maybe others haven't, I have some other questions, but if I read this, you talked about your federal inmates. If you're averaging 26, and I think your budget was 50.
It was 50, yes.
Let's just say you're at half of that, you're gonna be about $1 million short in your revenue for 2025's budget.
Based on that.
Looking at cutting $1 million somewhere? Well, I guess I'm just looking, because your revenue was short $1 million in 2024, and your expenses were 3.8 million, I think, over the budget, but you're already looking at, if the numbers you provided will stay at 26, you're gonna be $1 million short. But
I understand that. That shortfall.
I know you understand, I'm just
Yeah,
wondering.
that shortfall, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is there an offset somewhere you're looking at your budget? Because I take it that $1 million is part of your overall budget, so.
It is.
Or should we just say we're gonna be $1 million over?
No.
That's the bottom line.
What we've done to try to correct, to relieve some of that stress is we've worked on overtime, as everybody knows, we talked about that. We believe the $300,000 in the black, as savings. All we can do is try to be more efficient, but those numbers were fat when we did them, and we discussed that. You were part of that conversation. So we met with finance and put that number, trying to be. We were hoping that there would be more, and all we continually ask marshals for more. And I don't know why they divvy them up the way they do, but this is where we've been pretty consistently. So I think it stands to reason that we can't expect 50 or more in the near future unless there's some big change. So all we can do is try to be realistic. So do I have $1 million laying in some offer somewhere? I do not.
I understand you don't, but just wondering if you're looking at cutting certain places. Again, I'm glad your overtime is certainly being looked at.
We just actually had this conversation about the summer was coming right before the meeting. The chief deputy came in and started pounding on me a little bit. They started this conversation already today a couple of times. So we are looking at everything, and things being what they are, we're doing a big against on the overtime.
Again,
Sure, if you want me
really hoping that it works out, because if human resources hadn't had the year they did as Brookside,
right? Chief deputy will have to address
totally different. Sorry.
So if you go through our budget, right, I mean, some of the things that we've talked about is to categorize our expenses like into essentials, non-essentials, discretionary, things like that. We are now fully staffed, so we could implement the hiring freeze, right? And then the problem's gonna be when we go short again, then we're just gonna be robbing from the overtime budget to shore up the U.S. Marshal over, or deficit, if you will, right? We've continued to ask the U.S. Marshals for inmates. The problem right now with the current administration is that the feds are not housing as many U.S. Marshal inmates as they were in the past. They're more concentrated on other entities, right? So some other things we talked about was, travel, training, consulting, things like that. But our training budget has been cut $20,000 in the last 2 years, and it really is only $160,000. So if I was to cut all training, that would only equate to $160,000. We're not a for-profit agency. So it's hard for us to just come up with ways to increase revenue sources. And yeah, I mean, we can go out and write more tickets, but it's not going to equate to $1 million. And our constituents aren't going to be super happy with that.
All right, Supervisor Grady, you have your.
Thank you, Madam County Executive. I'm looking at this document here, which is the finance thing, was the initial one we started out with. I'm looking at page 3. And the top 3 items on page 3, items causing increase the general fund. We have human services as a line item. We have Brookside as a line item. We have public works as a line item. These are all items in the black, but I'd like to have each division respond, each department respond, what the prognostication might be for this upcoming year, 2026. Human services, would we take a look at being approximately the same? Looking at reduction, same thing for Brookside, and then same thing for Public Works. If each could kind of comment what the anticipation might be, not being held to a hard and fast prognostication, but at least just to give us an idea of what they feel might occur in this upcoming year. Thank you.
Tammy.
I would say it's way too early to project that out. We're not expecting as much of a surplus in human services. The state budget is going to affect our budget greatly, and what our end goals and needs are needed once we start the budget process, which will start end of May. So I do not project that much of a surplus that we have right now. And Brookside, just so we're aware of, is in a separate fund. It's not in the general fund, and they are in a negative right now. So we are building that back up and covering their debt. And then human services, yes, I do expect, hoping for some good state budget changes, but we will not know that until possibly July if it gets passed timely.
So as a follow-up question, when we take a look at human services, approximately what % comes from the Fed, what % comes from the state?
Offhand, I'm not positive on that. It is in my budget book. For the human services, yeah, I don't want to throw a number out there. I know 18% of our budget is levy, and then the rest is coming from state and Fed combined.
Very well. So what do we have for a public works operating surplus prognostication there?
I think I saw Chris enter the room, so I'll kick it over.
So I wouldn't expect the return that we had this year in 24. A lot of you probably remember we were down 2 directors that were filled mid-year. With that, there were some superintendents that also laid pretty heavy into salaries. When that happens, usually divisions aren't looking at projects to go after. They're kind of just staying status quo and making sure operations don't falter. So we've taken, and there's the highway GTA funds that we already know is a little bit under budget in regards to revenue going into highways. We've taken some precautions during the closeout to make sure that 25 doesn't falter in the red, but I wouldn't imagine a very high black. I would assume somewhere relative to flat or slightly higher.
Samantha?
Chris, I just wanted you, could you elaborate a little bit on the GTA funds, because some of the supervisors might not know what those are.
It's one of the biggest contributions that the state gives, the Department of Transportation gives to highways. It's a big, long calculation, takes into all kinds of different infrastructure. Actually, some of the sheriff expenditures and different things get built into this. And then it's based off a 6-year average. So it's one of the things that I've notated in a couple of the budget presentations that in the next couple of years, we may see a decent drop. Just because those who may remember, whether you're on the board or not, Highway S was a very expensive project. So that obviously inflated the number a little bit. In 28, that large sum of that will kind of fall off. There is ceilings and floors to the GTA fund, so you're not to just take an extremely huge hit. But we would expect some type of hit in the near future. We're already looking at different ways that we can try and lessen the blow, but it'll be a blow nonetheless.
So I think the long and short of it is for these three top items, we've heard the Brookside is having a little bit less success, more challenge than what they've had in the past. That's actually in the red. And these other two will not be as robust as they've been in the past. So I guess we take your point that this will be a very challenging budget year. I yield the floor. Thank you.
Are there other questions from supervisors on things that weren't? Oh, there you go. John Frank, sorry.
Thank you. Patty, can you give us an idea of what percentage of the 2025 budget was funded by grants? Do you have any idea roughly? It's like 10, 20%. Well, because I know the bonding was probably what, 20, 30 million?
Bonding was about 20 million.
20 million?
Yes. Lobby was 78. I thought it was 78. Barn is doing math on his.
We're to ask you a math
we're
question.
looking up. If you give us just a minute, we can check on
No
it.
problem.
Are there other questions while finance is working on loading up their computer?
The reason I ask while Barn is looking is because I'm concerned, and I'm sure other supervisors are concerned, that if or how many of those grants are on the potentially state and federal grants are on the chopping block, because if they are, then obviously we have one of two options. We're going to have to either increase bonding or cut spending or some other way of making up the difference. I was just curious as to how much we're looking at, because
as Barna looks, I'll kind of comment on a little bit of basic budgeting, and that is we're not bonding for operations. We cannot bond for operations. So
Okay.
those grants fund operations. They fund programs. There is some grant funding that are used towards capital, but the lion's share of the grant funding is towards programs. One of the things we have to look at as we find out what's happening with these grants is this something that we have to offer or something that we want to offer? And then we'll have to have those conversations at that time.
Anyway, why don't you give a little bit of overview? You early on in February, when some of the discussions from the federal government came down just about in general, some of the big dollars that come down from the feds. We work closely with our partners, and so do all the directors here. So when we hear something, we immediately.
Yes, well, some of them were very unexpected, and so some of us lost a lot of sleep, but outside of that, fortunately, many of those actions were frozen and we could at least get funds flowing until we could figure out what was happening. We have sat in on various different webinars. Things are just in flux. It's FEMA being one of the things, the BRIC grant being another thing. It seems like every day we find out that this will or this will not. Unfortunately, then that isn't always the final answer either, because it's no, this is going to stop, but then the courts step in and say you can't do that yet. I don't know exactly how that's going to work.
Yeah, because I've heard that someone mentioned that we wouldn't have a clear idea until July, but the federal budget doesn't have to be passed till end of September.
Correct.
That's assuming they don't just do a CR, continuing resolution.
Correct.
But
the other component is The federal portion is one thing, but we get state grants that
Right.
come through the federal as well. So that creates an issue as well. And I mean, they talk a lot about the Medicaid funding, whether Medicaid funding is going to be cut. So let me step a little further kind of outside of our normal realm, but many of our lower paid employees might be on Badger Care. So they're not on our health insurance right now. Badger Care is funded by Medicaid. If Medicaid is cut and Badger Care is cut, then those employees are going to have to go on our health insurance, which is not something that we've projected for. We don't know what that impact is. So those are things that we're taking a look at, but we're not studying at this point until we have a little firmer information. And then if information is still not firm, then we'll have to start to do the different scenarios of this is what happens if this happens, this is what happens if that happens.
Right. Thanks.
So just to give some raw numbers, so for the 2025 budget of our $294 million of revenue, 96 million of that was intergovernmental revenue, which would be state and federal. So roughly a third.
That is a lot.
That is a lot. A majority of that, I would say, Tammy could confirm or deny that, but I think a majority of that would be in human services when it comes to the intergovernmental revenue.
Thanks, Marna.
Next up, Supervisor Garcia.
Thank you, Connie, Executive. I got a question for the DPW. Since I've been on the board, the Kemper Center has come up quite a few times. I know when I first started, there was a study that was done. In that study, I can't remember, did they explore the option of selling the Kemper Center?
They laid out 3 options. One wasn't being able to sell. There were certain restrictions that were found that when it was deeded to the county, that it's not an option. But I can kick it over to Wyatt. I know he was part of that process. If you have further questions on that Kemper study.
Yeah, I can give you just sort of a brief overview of those options. And I do have a report on it as well. So if you would like, I can send you a copy of it. But short of selling it, in terms of what those options provided, there were ways to make it financially profitable. So for example, if the county were to take over full operations, because it's currently run by Kemper Center Inc., which is a nonprofit organization, and they're in charge and can take rental revenue for things like events, weddings, and whatnot. If the county were to take over operations, we can implement a different model. So that was recommended by the study. The other more cost-effective way that I would consider it close to selling it would be mothballing it. So to close up the Kemper Center, a very pretty looking building, still on the National Register of Historic Buildings, but functionally not operating on the inside. And then the third option, which was considered to be high risk, would be to do RFPs for different private organizations to do different operations within the Kemper Center. So one potentially to do the historic tours and to continue historic preservation. And then a few other ones to do more, I will say, revenue generating operations. So like a beer garden or something like a cafe. So those were the 3 main categories.
So there's absolutely nothing the county can do to get rid of the Kemper Center.
So to get rid of it, as far as I know, according to the lease, no.
Okay.
If you're looking to cease operations there, what the Keene study did recommend was mothballing it, because at the end of the day, it still is a park. You know, is it meant to be revenue generating? That's not really for me to say, but if it were to be something like mothballed, for example, that's where we would close it. We would still maintain the building and pay special attention to the exterior of the building, but also still maintain it as a park. You know, it still has gardens that the public can enjoy. It has a bike path on the back side, as well as a soccer field and other grass areas that people can use.
Supervisor Nordigan, you have a question on this particular issue?
Yes, I do. Thank County Executive. On the selling of it, there is one entity and only one that we can sell it to. And both mayors turned me down when I tried to even give it to them, and that's the city of Kenosha. And we have the smarter of the 2 of the current mayor here. I don't know if she can talk him into it or not, but but that's it. It has to go to a municipality. It cannot go anywhere else because of how it was purchased and I guess the federal government got involved and we get somebody else got the gold mine. I think we got the shaft on this one, but that's just the way it goes.
Thank you, Supervisor Nordigan. Next up, Supervisor Geerton. Let's you.
Thank you, Madam County Executive. In the last budget cycle, we adopted policy that helped us with the budget. So we did a couple of resolutions. So for example, me, Aaron, Tim worked with Amanda, and we worked with Dustin, we worked with Rebecca, and we worked with John, and we adopted some resolutions that ended up becoming statewide policy through Wisconsin County Association, and we actually did get more revenue, more state aids for child support. Is there anything this board should be looking at? I mean, I'm not seeing anything come in or us working on anything. Is there anything this board should be adopting similar to what we did in the last budget cycle?
So Supervisor Geerton, we are working on a resolution on courts funding. So WCA is pushing forth a proposal for $70 million to help offset the course costs. And I know the clerk of court is here and Rebecca and actually myself and the chair have been working on a resolution to support that $70 million to help support our court cost.
So is that going through the J-Law committee then?
That would be going to the
Legislative committee, so that's going through supervisor from the 9th district or his committee. So, and do we have any idea how that would help us with our budget?
We're not sure yet how it will come down, but we're hopeful that it will help bring in some additional revenue. Again, this is a blanket 70 million asking for the entire state. So again, how we incorporate our expenses, and we already do very well with reporting our expenses. I mean, that is one thing that through this process, I have researched with Patty and Rebecca. So,
but staying on the same issue, I heard the sheriff mention a couple of things at the federal level in your report. Is there any legislation we should look at adopting to help you with some of your stuff, getting revenue, right? Getting the telephone revenue you talked about, and some of this stuff. I know I've been through all that. Is there anything we could be looking at working with Brian Stile and some of our other legislators?
Actually, I plan on reaching out to Brian to reference this. The reality is that this is in limbo and no one knows where it's going to land. The FCC hasn't come down with a hard number. That there is no set new policy. There's no set new legislation. So we're waiting. It's a waiting game. And every sheriff's office is frustrated because it's part of their budgets.
I'll just put it out there. I mean, I'm only one of 23, but if anyone in the administration has something they would like me to help work on and sponsor, that'll help our budget. And then I would try to work with other supervisors to help with this budget since we're in this biennial budget. And with that, I yield.
All right. Supervisor Geerton, I thank you for that. And if anybody through any of their associations hears about resources or things that might be available, feel free to reach out to any of the team members. I know we're always looking and always trying to stay on top of things that we are hearing. And like the courts has been something that WCA has been working on for a while this year because shared revenue got passed last year. This was the big ask this year. In Kenosha County, we have costs of interpreters, our attorney costs, and then our legal, our paralegals and that staff. So those were the things that we were really trying to concentrate on when I was trying to talk with my other county execs and county administrators. It is really interesting, with regards to interpreters, some counties up north, they don't really have a high interpreter cost, but we do. The additional attorneys cost, we do. Those are the types of expenses that real dollars from the state would help us offset the cost of our budget. So, all right. Are there other questions that people have for any of the people that are here tonight? Okay.
For Linda Bagdell for Brookside, I realize there's long-term and short-term debt. but it kind of sounded like you were in the red, but it, in reality, Brookside is making money this year. Or your income or revenue is sufficient at this point?
Maybe you could give details on the purpose of the debt and where that originated from.
Yeah, so right now their fund is in a negative balance. They are doing much better. They are in the black, but they still have to cover the debt. So their fund right now is a negative. So they do owe the county money. We are working on a payment repayment plan. That's where Patty's talking about the short term versus long term. So there is amount owed. It is getting taken care of faster than what we were expecting. So that is the good part of it. I would expect at the rate they're going right now with filling the beds and with the Medicaid rate increase, maybe 5-ish years for them to be break even.
Understood. It just sounded like when it was said they were in the red, they weren't making money this year, but that's not. They are actually, their revenue is fine. They still just owe the long-term and the short-term debt back to the county.
Yeah, they're in a negative. They have a negative fund balance right now.
I have a question for the registered deeds for last year. You were $354,000 less than your budgeted revenue. How do you think 2025 is going to be? That's all right.
I wasn't prepared to bring numbers, but when I ran the report for this first quarter, I think I sent it to the supervisors as well. We definitely are doing better than last year. There's a little more development, so that looks good. And also with Real ID going on, with a lot more vital records being sold, so it looks more positive.
Excellent. And did Terry leave?
She did.
Mark? Yeah, no, again, I was just looking at where we were short revenues in 24 to see where we thought we were going to be in 25. But she was only about 200,000, but I was just checking. And I'm just going to comment on the sheriff's mental health thing. Clearly, I brought it up last year. I realized where the funds are, but whether he stressed it enough, it is one of the most important things this county board can do is to bring that type of program. That alone, I think, will reduce his overtime for sickness and some of the calling that occurs. So I would hope when we get to that point that you stress it a lot stronger. Sure.
Just to be clear, I'm not trying to be disrespectful to the county board. Okay, but I would be remiss if I didn't say it. That's why I brought it up.
Well, I think that's a program that we talked about last year when we were working on the budget. And again, it, got too late in the game. And this time around, we're talking about it on the front end as we make those difficult decisions going forward, as we prioritize the different budgets that we have. And this is really an opportunity to give you a full overview of the different programs and where we sit today in the county. Again, we have a great team who's willing to do whatever it takes to get the job done, but it costs money, and it does and prioritizing in human services, and prioritizing in all and in the sheriff's office, and then in public works, and then in the other agencies, IT, is one of the big. It's got a big capital budget on it, so it's not necessarily something that we talked about tonight. But again, that team is working because again, that will be something that in 2026, when we move into the new human services building, a lot of resources are being put into that building to again have a state of the art and something that will last us for 30, 40 years. So again, I just really appreciate everybody's time and attention tonight. I also want to thank Jill, Joe, and Stacy from my office for organizing with everybody here and all the directors. So if we could give them a round of applause. And again, this is just the first step in the process. So again, take these documents home, read through them, ask questions of everybody going forward. So again, I thank everybody for coming tonight. Meeting is adjourned.